Okay, so welcome everybody. I can see people are joining currently, but we're going to start the session. We're going to start the session on time. My name's Professor Jackie Leigh. I'm from the University of Edge Hill, and I'm the Director of Nursing and Midwifery Education, and I'm co-chairing this session with Jo. Do you want to just introduce yourself, Jo?
Yep. Hi, I'm Jo Crease. I'm a Senior Manager in the Social Prescribing team at NHS England, with a particular focus on workforce development.
Okay, brilliant. So we have a fantastic breakout session for you today. With the presenters are Dr. Michelle Howarth, who's a Senior Lecturer at the University of Salford, Deputy Director of Postgraduate Research Training, and also is the lead of the National Social Prescribing Network Special Interest Group. And co-presenting today is Bogdan, who is a Social Prescribing Champion Programme Lead at the National Academy for Social Prescribing. And we are really, really pleased also to have some students with us as well, who's going to explore their experiences around social prescribing. So I'm just going to hand you over to Jo now, who's just going to tell you how this session's actually going to be operationalised.
Thank you, and I think we'll just probably see other folks joining us in the next couple of minutes. So yes, as Jackie's already said, we're really focusing on the next generation of social prescribing champions and the social prescribing ambassadors and flag wavers of the future. And already the future is here, as my colleague Michelle often says. The future's already out there, so it will be really exciting to hear from you all a little bit later. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the work that's being undertaken to encourage students to engage with social prescribing as part of their training and as their studies, and hear from some students as we do that. We're going to start off with Michelle. I think maybe first of all, we just need to ask everybody to, as you join us, you're very welcome. Can you make sure that your microphones are on mute whilst you're listening to the speakers? We'd welcome you to introduce yourselves in the chat and to say where you're from and maybe what your special interests are. We're going to hear from everybody first, and we're going to have some a good amount of time for questions and answers and a bit of a discussion. So do kind of have a little think as we go along about what it is you'd like to ask, and we'll be taking questions from the chat as well as you'll be able to put your hand up and ask your question in person. So if you're one of those folks who likes to say your question out loud, then you'll have that chance. But if you'd prefer to write it in the chat and have one of us read it out, then you've got that option as well. Okay, so before I hand over to Michelle, I wanted just to say I was really excited when I noticed earlier today that you're in the School of Health and Society, and it just thought that was such a fantastic indication of where you're coming from, that thinking about health as part of much wider picture. So on that note, love to invite you to kick us off this afternoon.
Okay, thanks, Jo. Leanne, could you share the slides for me, please? Thank you. I will say the School of Health and Society is growing, Jo. We now also have the Greater Manchester Police Constabulary with us training. So it's quite odd going into work these days when you kind of see a mixture of uniforms, police, counsellors, nurses. So yeah, it's growing. Apologies for my very deep voice. I've got a head cold at the minute, so I don't normally sound this kind of deep, and apologies for coughing. So yeah, welcome to today. Could you move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so hopefully myself and Bogdan are going to talk a bit about the work that we've been doing to encourage our students to understand more around social prescribing. And it's fair to say that our students currently are kind of trained with a very pathogenic model, and a lot of placements and a lot of the models out there are predominantly facing, this idea that we need to fix people, and that whole world around personalised care seems to take second place. I'm not saying anything controversial here. It's a well recognised challenge that we face in a lot of our curricula. So myself and Bogdan have been working together for quite a while now, and Bogdan's going to talk about his brilliant National Student Championship scheme, and I'm going to talk about the work that the Personalised Care Interprofessional Education Group, also known as PerCIE, is doing to enable students to experience third sector working, to understand what social prescribing is, and to understand how personalised care is promoted through that route as well. And so I've got some students on a video that have experienced that, and I'm really pleased that we've got Samuel and Wetlin here today as well to talk about the championship scheme. So I'll hand over to Bogdan shortly. Could you go on to the next slide, please? Okay, so I know you probably can't just make that out, but essentially the PerCIE group was set up a couple of years ago as a task and finish group as part of the wider National Social Prescribing Network interest group. And what we recognised as educationalists was that there was a real passion and a need to explore how we engage with the curriculum to enable our students to experience very different placements. So, for example, in nursing, a 3-year degree programme, 50% of that is spent in practice, and typically those practice learning environments are in the NHS, where we learn how to look after people and fix them mainly. And even when our students go out into the community setting, they often work with district nursing services. They don't actually work with the voluntary private independent sector to understand how we can promote well-being to prevent that person from coming into hospital in the first instance. So a group of us got together to try and see if we could collaborate on a framework that would be transferable across nursing, midwifery and allied health professionals. And that's what you see on the right. We did produce that framework, and the task and finish group never actually finished. We kept growing. So whilst we finished the product, which is freely available, we grew. And we think we've grown because it's now acting as a community of practice for collaboration and innovation. We have over 57 members, and our aim is to kind of explore quality assurance within the third sector, to think about, well, if we're sending our students out there, what they're learning, how they're learning, what support do they need, what are the practical implications. So each of the meetings that we have, which are monthly, we have a presentation and we have a discussion about what are the challenges, how are we tackling those, and it's a very sharing, caring kind of community. I'm really pleased to say that we have membership from third sector organisations and students, a number of higher education institutions, and North West Social Prescribing Leeds. And we now have representation from Wales, Ireland and Scotland, and we're kind of trying to reach out to an international group as well. So we meet virtually and we showcase the work and opportunities, and we're learning a lot. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is all about developing a cultural shift away from this pathogenic view. We just love Lord Crisp's idea that you need to take off your NHS specs every so often to see the person beyond the patient. But it is quite a battle. It's not easy, and we are up against professional statutory regulatory bodies that have got very fixed ideas about standards and processes, but we're gradually becoming heard. And we also want to make sure that our learners are fully prepared to work in a partnership with a range of sectors. We're ambitious. We want our students to work with link workers. We want them to work with health and wellbeing coaches. We want them to work with care coordinators. We realise that there are a lot of challenges to that, but we're not fazed by it. We keep meeting and saying, how can we do this? Ultimately, we want a workforce that's going to be able to adapt to the changing needs of the wider population out there. Next slide, please. So there are a number of benefits to our students going out into different organisations, and a couple of years ago we did a small evaluation of some second year students that went out to third sector organisations. It took a little bit of convincing to get the students out there, both convincing the students that this was all right because they were worried about, will I meet my proficiencies? I won't be doing injections, what am I going to be doing? Because that's the way they've always known nursing. And it took a little bit of energy getting to convince the third sector organisations as well that students were a good thing, that they weren't going to be a resource implication, and that actually they could enhance and help them to develop their organisation. And so there's a few comments there from the actual organisations, and what they found is that when the students come out, they provide a real energy. They're providing this kind of insight that they've not seen before. It gives the organisation a really different perspective. They get a lot from it. The students get a lot from it, and individuals get a lot from it. One of our students went out to work with Inspiring Communities Together, which works with the Age Well campaign across Salford. And they were working with a group of octogenarians, so these are your 80 pluses, and they were working with in this Tech and Tea programme. So getting 80-year-olds online and connecting with their families, etc. And they were working with the older people, making a real difference, connecting them. A couple of them hadn't been to see their doctor for some time, and the dentist, they hadn't had any health checks or anything. So the student nurses were able to advise on the benefits of keeping healthy and warm and connected, so they could draw on their experiences as student nurse as well as them learning about that whole environment. So let's hear from the students themselves. So I'm hoping the little video works. If we can go to the next slide and press play. So this should work, fingers crossed.
I've got no sound on that. I wonder if Leanne, you might need to unmute.
Oh, you've got no sound. Can you hear anything now?
Hi, Leanne. You just need to reshare it again and slide across the audio setting.
Okay, I've got it.
Okay.
Do you hear that all right
Social
now?
prescribing
Yep,
to me
well done.
is looking at a holistic approach to social prescribing to me is looking at a holistic approach to healthcare.
Social prescribing to me is healthcare for the mind, body and soul.
Social prescribing to me is making sure that nobody in society gets left behind and every aspect of their needs is looked after.
Social prescribing to me is a non-clinical intervention which looks at individualized care to meet the needs of the individual and maximize their health.
So we took part in a pilot study for social prescribing, which was a first-time placement, and the purpose was for student nurses to experience this to see if it was a takeaway from more traditional placements.
It was very interesting because I got to learn about what social prescribing is.
It opened up more doors into you could see how people were in the community rather than in a ward setting, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
So during our placement we came across many different varieties of people. We got engaged in many different activities, so it was a wide scope from being in the outdoors. We was doing things around getting careers started, doing job clubs, so it was helping people get back onto the career ladder that might not have been able to do that on their own and independently.
What I learned as well is when these members are doing these activities, you could see the joy you know, they feel that they have something to look up to. Some of them I spoke to talk about being stressed, because when they are home, they're socially isolated, they are kind of stressed, and coming to that environment where they could mix with other members kind of reduces that social isolation. They're able to make friends and they're able to do things. And when they do this work, it gives them joy in the sense that they're happy that they could produce something.
I think as nurses, networking is a massive thing, and the more people that you can meet, the more things that you can get involved in, and like I said before, become a more all-rounded nurse, and the more that we can take in, the more we can give out to the people.
So there's a lot of health benefits. It shows that it brings out the full potentials of each of these members, and it also shows that, you know, it's kind of help them channel those negative thoughts and channel it into positive thoughts each time they create those different projects that they do. Because some of them actually told me that when they are home, they have these flashbacks of their childhood traumas that they may have passed through. And when they come to that environment and engage with people and do these activities, those negative thoughts are now turned into positive thoughts.
And I think the social prescribing placement doesn't stop there for us. We are definitely going to be going back year on after year to help out at the Christmas parties and volunteer. It doesn't end here.
Can you move on to the next slide? Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. So that was kind of some of the stories that our students had about their particular experience. They did come back and say, you know, for the first time, we saw the person and not the patient. And I think it was really important learning that no matter how many challenges it took to get them out there, it was worth it in the end. And I know when I watched that video for the first time, I remember talking to my husband saying, you know what, education does make a difference. I've been a lecturer for 22 years and it absolutely makes a difference when you get it right like this. So so I'm really pleased that they offered to do that video, and they did get such an awful lot out of it, and we're currently trying to develop those kind of placements from here on in, and that's some of the work of the PerCIE group. So I'll stop now and I'll hand over to Bogdan, who's going to talk about the amazing Social Prescribing Student Championship scheme, which I think is a few slides on. If you want to move them on, Leanne, for us, thank you.
Amazing, thank you ever so much, Michelle. It's fantastic to see the student nurses. What a beautiful video in there, and it just truly portrays and illustrates the change in values and beliefs, I guess, that we're trying to nurture. I was back in the day when the scheme started. I was a medical student myself, and I remember being utterly frustrated by what we're being taught and how we were being taught to mindlessly run around and just patch people up and just stick a bit of a plaster in this kind of revolving door system. And so it's, you know, you all know that quote that you send people back to get on with their other life and their previous illness. So you get them well for the moment, but then you patch them up only for the time being, and then you send them home. So that narrative is very helpful to change. And I could really see how it changed their perceptions around personalized care in general, more broadly as well. And that's exactly what we were hoping to do as well, because as we all know, social prescribing is one of the principles of the wider personalized care aspect. And I wish I knew about some of the other principles, such as shared decision making, personal budgets, and all the other things that come with when I was in medical school, but I wasn't taught at the time. So I'm not going to ramble for too much, because I'm pretty sure a lot of you will be familiar with this, but we started the Social Prescribing Champion scheme at the time, NHS Social Prescribing Champion scheme, because we had a lot of support from NHS England. We also had their support through the official gateway process, and the scheme was launched with support from NHS England, Social Prescribing Network, and several other partners at the time. And essentially the model was very simple, was to choose one person, one student from each medical school in the UK at the time, and then each one teach one, really. So they could learn about it first, and then they would just pass it on and spread the word amongst their peers. And so we started with medical students, and over the years that grew more so. And you can see, you'll hear from Samuel later, who's one of the allied healthcare professional students joining the scheme this year, because the scheme has been expanded to allied healthcare professionals as well. And Wetlin will also mention some exciting news about nursing students too shortly, and we'll definitely work with Michelle to improve the relationship there as well for nursing and midwife students as well. But just a bit more about the schemes. I can't believe it's been 6 years now. Gosh, how time flies. But if we go to the next slide, you could really see the army of students that have been built over the years and what they've achieved. And there's been countless presentations. We've really lost count because there's about 200 champions every single year from medical schools and allied healthcare professional roles across the whole of the UK, and they all teach personalised care and social prescribing within their own universities, and wear their champion badge with pride, I guess, within those environments. We've done several national conferences that many of you have contributed to in the past, and I've tried to really highlight the need to teach this to students across as well. If we move to the next slide. We've also expanded a bit even further in terms of the support we've received. So with many thanks to the National Academy for Social Prescribing, we managed to secure social prescribing studentships and formalise a bit of a funding stream with £30,000 per year devoted to studentships across the UK. And we've had 25 studentships last year, and very similar this year as well. We've been going global with this as well. There is Portugal, Canada, Singapore, Australia, and the US that have all launched their own social prescribing student champion schemes so far, and that makes us feel very proud. Every year we host 2 Harvard Medical School interns with us on social prescribing, and so it's gone really beyond the borders of the UK, and we developed a bit of a toolkit to support people and students and academics across the world who want to start their own student scheme abroad as well. And if we go to the next slide, you will see that the launch from some of these areas. You will probably see shortly a launch from the Australian student social prescribing scheme that happened a year ago or a year and a half ago. And then we have on the right hand side the Portuguese scheme that was being launched, that I know Canada is just launching theirs as well. But I'm now going to move on, and without further ado, I would really love you to speak to the students, and I want you to hear from some of them who are here present with us. I think it's worth hearing their experiences. After all, it's a student-led project. We're just there to help. I started as a student myself as well, and there were superb mentors around, like Michelle, like everybody else involved in the scheme. And of course, I know Jo is working as part of the wider NHS-CNI team, but everybody in the team has been of huge help for us over the years. All of our conferences would have not happened without the ongoing support of the mentors. So we're really deeply grateful for that. So next slide, please. I want to introduce you to 2 fantastic champions, one of which is Wetlin Chen, a medical student at Birmingham Medical School, and then later you'll hear from Samuel. But Wetlin is really a enthusiastic individual that has won also the award for the best social prescribing student champion. So just wanted to give a bit of a round of applause for yesterday, Wetlin. Congratulations for that as well. Over to you, Wetlin, and tell us more about your role as a champion.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for that introduction, Bogdan, and also for the opportunity to represent and speak on behalf of the medical students from the scheme. So as Bogdan said, my name is Wetlin, and I'm a 4th year medical student at the University of Birmingham. I thought I would just share a bit about my journey and experience as a student champion of the scheme. So I joined the scheme as a student champion in 2019 after coming across the opportunity in my medical school newsletter. I began championing social prescribing among my peers at Birmingham and was also empowered to proactively seek opportunities to learn about social prescribing, for example, spending time with a link worker on my general practice placement. And at the start of the pandemic, I got involved in content creation and development for the scheme, and have been leading the social media and communications front of the scheme since early last year. I've also continued teaching around social prescribing, which is in line with my interests in medical and health professions education. And I most recently completed a social prescribing teaching project as my student selected module. So I have found these peer teaching sessions so enriching, as social prescribing is not something that is formally taught in my curriculum. And although my peers have heard of the term social prescribing, they recognise that their knowledge is limited to just that. And it's so rewarding to be able to conclude lessons having imparted knowledge to peers and inspired them to find out more. So we know that social prescribing is a powerful tool for connecting communities, but championing social prescribing has also made me, as a healthcare student, feel more connected to communities too, and the people that I will see in my future clinical practice, which I think is otherwise too easily lost when the focus is on studying and, as Michelle mentioned, sort of treating disease. And being part of the scheme has provided me with amazing opportunities to work with like-minded students, as Bogdan has mentioned, and grow the student movement both nationally and internationally. The scheme has also enabled me and empowered me to explore my interest in graphic design and social media, which I acquired at the start of the pandemic. And this is an interest and a skill that I'll take forward and apply in future roles, as I see social media as a powerful means of communication, sharing ideas, and connection. And we only have to look to Social Prescribing Day yesterday to see that power. And this exploration of other interests is an aspect of the scheme that we really try to support and empower students to do. And that's really one of the joys. We have champions who are creating podcasts, videos, fundraising, running, baking, all with this common aim of learning about social prescribing and championing it among peers and health professionals. So there is sometimes this narrative of medics working with medics, and the scheme is really keen to change that. We hear these terms multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary a lot, and we know delivering social prescribing and actually clinical care, of course, is a huge multidisciplinary effort. But my question is, shouldn't we be starting this as students? Unfortunately, day to day, I rarely learn alongside students from other health professions. So I'm delighted that the scheme is really driving the shift in culture and making interdisciplinary collaboration a priority. And this last year has been really exciting, as we've had Anya and David join us to expand the scheme to AHP students. And what they've achieved in such a short space of time has just been incredible. They've managed to rally up, I think, almost all the AHP professional bodies and recruit AHP mentors, while also simultaneously welcoming a brand new cohort of AHP champions who have just enriched the scheme so tremendously. And since our joint onboarding session last November, we have linked up our medical and AHP champions at each university to work collaboratively in championing social prescribing within their regions. And I believe there have been some joint events this week actually to celebrate Social Prescribing Week. So Bogdan has kindly given me the honour of announcing that we have a new studentship this year for a nursing and midwifery coordinator to follow a similar structure as we expand sustainably to other health professions. So some very exciting things in the works. Overall, being a student champion has empowered me to proactively seek a knowledge and experiences around social prescribing, and this is for the benefit of patients in the future, and to reframe my focus back to people in our communities, which is ultimately what health and healthcare is about. So thanks for listening to a bit of my story about social prescribing this scheme, and I think Sam will tell us more from the AHP side of things, but first back to Bogdan.
Superb. Thank you ever so much, Wetlin, and thank you for the great news about the nursing and midwifery studentship. And can I just say, we've actually interviewed people, and we are ready to even announce it over the next few days. And there's a highly passionate individual that I think will really, Michelle, clatter your inbox with a lot of emails just to kind of ask for an offer for support from you, really. So I'm not sure if that's good or bad news, but I think it's good news, isn't it? So that's fantastic. And Wetlin spoke about something that I'm sure we'll get to speak by the end of the session. But can you notice how this is social prescribing, this is personalized care more widely, but it's also something we've not challenged for a long time and we should have had, is the whole definition of health in general, is the way we've been taught over the years and missed the idea that what keeps us well starts in our local communities and at home. It's the idea that doctors should focus, and allied healthcare professionals and nurses should also focus on the individual and their well-being in the community. And so trying to shape that and shift that narrative is the wider picture here. And that really starts with the workforce, starts with the students, because it's not a quick fix. And I think we're looking at a new generation 5 years from now, 6 years from now, that yes, indeed, is going to take 5 years or 6 years, but at least is going to be the good kind of healthcare professionals that you want to be treated by in the future as well. Thank you, Wetlin. And now I'm going to go to Samuel. Samuel, thank you so much for being here. And we are super, super delighted to have you with us, especially having our healthcare professional students involved in the scheme. Wetlin spoke about Anya and David and the efforts that you've all put in. And we've heard you're a highly enthusiastic and passionate occupational therapy student. So we would love to hear about your role as a champion.
Sure. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Bogdan. So I personally first heard about social prescribing during the Royal College of Occupational Therapy conference last year. It was the first time I'd heard about it, but it immediately jumped out to me as holistic and the way that we work, and it summarized how I felt about communities. So when the position of student champion came up about October last year, I jumped at it like straight away, as I thought it would be a great opportunity. So after I was accepted, we had our onboarding session, and it was great to meet up with fellow students from other professionals, not just the medics, but also different AHPs, such as speech and language professionals, and I think there was a radiographer. And it was great to hear what they thought of social prescribing and what they thought their potential was. So after the onboarding session, we were given a mentor. So our mentor was an occupational therapy lecturer at the University of Salford. And we had different students all around the country, from Glasgow to Cardiff to East Anglia. We were all able to talk about our experiences and what we had in our minds for all of our events and shared thoughts and feelings. So what I did personally, I connected through our occupational therapy society. So we have a very active society here at the university, which we have speakers from all over the world. So I was able to be one of those speakers. And I had to do my own research, because even though I had a base knowledge of what social prescribing was, I needed to be able to increase that knowledge, expand it. And I think what was really useful was using the AHP social prescribing framework from the RSPH, which I felt was really useful. I then got involved with OTalk, which is a weekly Twitter-based conversation, which they have every Tuesday at 7 p.m. And in February, they had one on social prescribing. So my event was, it was a presentation which I gave to 25 students. I think they were mainly occupational therapy students, although we did have 2 physios and a nurse on board just to hear about. And I gave my own personal experience of someone who I'd met, who had been put into, who joined a care farm, and who'd gained some really great experience, and also OT run exercise groups, which I had also found. And then we also gave examples of other AHPs and what they could do to promote social prescribing in their fields. So following the presentation, we all had a group discussion, and it was really healthy discussion, and it was really everyone was really interested. We had from people who had been connected with link workers compared to people who had never heard social prescribing before. So it was a really range of backgrounds, and we were able to discuss different thoughts of what we think social prescribing can have an impact in our professions and wider. And I think following the session, I actually saw like a real impact during lecture sessions. There were people bringing into case studies, bringing it into discussion points, and various people actually bringing it into assignments. And there was one or two students who were currently on placement who said they were going to discuss it with their practice educator, which shows that even though they were students, they were going to bring it into their workforce, which I thought was really interesting. And I know as a third year student, I have just accepted a job as a community mental health practitioner. So I know I'm going to bring it forward as my working profession next year. And I know that might have been quite occupational therapy focused. However, I do know there's other AHPs all around the country from all different professions that are doing similar experiences, just like me, which has been all very exciting to hear. So that was my experience, and thank you for letting me share it.
Super, and I know there will be a rich conversation following that. I just posted as well on the chat, Samuel. You can truly notice the difference that it makes when you all teach one another, and then all you need, like I needed at the time, was a bit of guidance and a bit of mentoring. So if you have a bit of a yearly program that allows you to enrich your skills and work on them and be provided with some guidance and some opportunities, I think you're more trustworthy and more likely to be believed by your peers because you're all in the same boat and you're not telling them what to do. It's not mandatory that you know about these things. You're just changing the system from the inside. And so we always believe the scheme to be a bit of a Trojan horse for the medical schools. And it did change the curriculum from the inside without the GMC changing it. It was the students changing it, the deans of the medical schools then changing it in that direction, and then slowly changing the curriculum in the longer run. So very interesting. But thank you very much for having us. I will hand over back to Jo and Jackie, and thank you for the lovely opportunity.
That's absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for all the speakers, especially to the students as well. Truly amazing. And I absolutely agree around the peer support, the peer learning. That's absolutely is spreading the word. And for me, we really do need to think about the curricula, you know, the interprofessional curricula, the health and social care curricula, to really embed social prescribing, to move away from not to move away, but to work side by side with maybe the pathogenic model. So what Jo and I would like to do really is open the floor to questions. So as Jo said, some of you might prefer to ask a question via the chat box, or it might be that you feel brave enough to actually just raise your hand, and I will pick through the raising of the hands, and Jo will actually just have a look through the chat box. So does anybody have a question to Michelle or Bogdan or to our fabulous students?
Jackie, whilst people are gathering their thoughts, I've got a bit of a technical question probably, and I wondered if one of the student champion folks could tell me what is a studentship? Who wants to pick that one up? Wentin, you look poised.
Yes, I can pick that one up. So the studentship was just something, I think it was Bogdan's amazing idea as well, just a sort of as a more formalized set program. So we had the champion scheme running in the background, and we still do have that running, but the studentship is just another level to recognize sort of a higher level of commitment to championing social prescribing. So we have a select couple of sort of the higher leadership positions in the scheme, which are recognised by this studentship. And it was launched last year, which I think Bogdan said there was 25. And that encompasses regional leads. So we have a defined person all across the UK who's sort of taking care of Northern Ireland has one, and also as well as all the places in England have one. And that's just a port of call for community sectors, the VSE, the CSE organisations to get in touch with, and also those regional leads are in charge of coordinating activities locally. And then we've got the higher positions, so the nursing and midwifery coordinator will sort of coordinate things centrally across the whole of the UK. That's in a nutshell what the studentship is sort of about.
Yeah, and just to say also, to build on that brilliant description, one thing, nothing to add really, is just to say it's £2,000 per student. Most of them, some of them are £1,000 depending on the role. Some of the leadership ones as coordinator and lead are £2,000, but some of them are £1,000. Every year the applications open in March, and there's a prerequisite to have been a champion at least in the past, or to have been involved in social prescribing in a way, so that there is that prerequisite before then as well. So it just recognises a bit of an extra mile, and there's a few deliverables for organising an event every year and doing a few teaching sessions and making sure they answer the contacts. But it's really formalised the movement. It's a bit of a society really, with a committee of individuals and with a bit of funding to recognise the work that students do through a studentship. It improves the career prospects, improves the skills, but also provides a bit of funding for the well, probably little funding for the many hours they put into that as well.
Perfect. Does that answer your question, Jo?
It does. I wanted to ask, I was going to say, oh, I'm sorry if this is a silly question, but I ban other people from saying I'm sorry and this is a silly question, because I don't believe in any of those kinds of things. But it's really, really interesting to hear the different angles that you guys are collectively coming at this issue from. And I was sort of reflecting whilst you were all talking that there are some structural challenges and there are some cultural challenges. And I wondered if, Michelle, I can see you're struggling a bit with your chest, and I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not up to it, but I wondered if you had any thoughts around, you know, the kind of ways of breaking down some of those structural challenges, and obviously being able to tell these amazing stories and show the different way is a really powerful way of doing that. And I wondered if you had any other reflections of what we can ask folks here to do.
So it's a great question, Jo, actually, and there's currently work being funded through Health Education England to try and understand what a sustainable model might look like in order for us to support our students. The idea is that we don't want them to go out into these third sector organisations and see it as unique. It needs to be normal, practice as normal. And to do that, there needs to be a lot of work around some of the structural challenges, such as assessment, supervision and support of the students while they're in the placement, the support of the organisation in terms of preparing them to have students, and also making sure that it's a bit of a win-win. So, for example, the ambition we have at the minute is to get students working with link workers. Well, clearly we need to make sure link workers don't feel overwhelmed with that, and that we align it to things like the competency framework to make sure that what the link workers are getting out of it is a good opportunity to learn about and with somebody, that those skills that they've got are transferable, that we are supporting future workforce development. And I think there's a lot of work to be done around, I mean, health education doesn't need convincing, neither does the universities, but I think where the problem might lie is around where the tariff and the HE contract sit. So where that money goes to support the students. If you've got small organisations that haven't got a huge HR department or haven't got the time and energy to complete a huge contract to support students, then who holds that? How do we engage with the training hubs? How do we engage with the ICSs? So there's a kind of a whole systems approach that's being developed and we're learning a lot about at the moment to try and overcome some of those structural challenges so that we can get our students out there and nursing and AHPs and midwives and medical students so they can get those placements as part of their curriculum as the norm. So we're working on it. I think it'll take a bit of time, a bit more time, but we're certainly pushing on open doors with it, thankfully.
Okay, I can't see any hands up, and I can't see, Jo, are there any questions? Oh, there is a hand up, sorry. Emma, you have your hand up. Are you okay to put your camera on?
Hi.
Perfect. Fire away.
I'll just take my hand down because I always forget to do that bit. Just wanted to, as I've said in the chat, just very excited to see Southampton University being represented, and congratulations with your future job. So I'm in Oxford and I came into social prescribing as a very passionate mental health OT, so you're on the right pathway, Samuel. I'm trying to sort of link in more with the education side. In fact, next week I'm giving a lecture to some second year adult nursing students on what is social prescribing, and I know that their lecturer is sort of curious to know about role emerging placements, which I've experienced as an OT, as a practice educator for student OTs, and I'm just wondering what other tips you can give to either help me talk to my local university, or any resources that come from the Champion Society to support us to do that collaboratively.
Bogdan, are you happy to answer, or Michelle? I'm thinking
absolutely, yeah,
be good as well.
Yeah, I can. Michelle, you can chip in just briefly. I just wanted to say, absolutely, Emma, I'm going to drop my email into the chat. There is a bit of a draft framework we put together for a long time. It's just not been published, but it surveyed a few thousands of students, and it asked really, how would you like to be taught? And it's very interesting. It's got 5 themes across. There's 5 key points that during the thematic analysis came out of there. And they were saying how long it should be, how it should be delivered, when should it be delivered, who should be involved. So it's quite insightful and very good. And then we put together a bit of a roundtable of stakeholders, including Health Education England, NHS England at the time, several other partners, and then asked them what they thought would be ideal. And then we just combined efforts into a bit of a paper. So that might be interesting to see. It's in draft format, so I will just forward that as well to you. But I think there's something around also just informal championing and the sphere of influence, that and the role modeling. And I cannot say how important that is personally, because of I see this in the hospital a lot. I've seen, whenever I was a junior doctor or a medical student in placement, people give you feedback always, and it's always on your biomedical skills. I've been told that procedure went well. I've been told I've dealt with that well, but I've never been told I've done some shared decision making with someone, or nobody's commented on personalized care principles that I've applied in the clinical environment, and nor are they sometimes assessed properly within those consultations either. So I think that role modeling is so important, and pointing out that it's crucial that we don't just look at the biomedical aspects, but that we also commend students for what they do and not condone it. I just had one of the champions who graduated last year. She's now a junior doctor, and she called me and she just said, this is not a rant. This is just to say, my registrar said, I'm a really good doctor. But then he said, I was just being too nice, and that wastes a lot of time in the hospital. And I thought, oh, that's very disappointing in a way, because she probably saved a lot of time by making sure that person has what they need in the community, and that they won't need to come back for more information or use somebody else's time. But the registrar told them they were a really good doctor, they did a really good job, but they should just patch them up and throw the bomb to somebody else, and maybe it explodes in somebody else's hands. And so I think that role model is really important. That's it from me. Michelle, I'll let you come in as well.
Yeah, Emmy, the sort of person with loving the PerCIE group, actually. So I put my email in there, because that, you know, how we work together, because often universities are businesses, aren't they? Well, they are businesses. We're all in competition with each other, all fighting for the same student placements, all fighting for students, all wanting to generate an income. And actually the PerCIE group forgets all of that. It's not competitive at all. There's nobody's got a chip on the shoulder, and it's literally about sharing what we know, and making sure that we can make a difference. Because ultimately, even though we're in universities, our philosophy has always been we are there to support and help people. I'm a qualified nurse. Bogdan's a doctor, you're an OT, and ultimately we come from a position of wanting to make a difference. You know, I've been in university for 22 years, and I've always battled against the business idea and said, you know what, we're there to change lives and make people's lives better. And you know, if it means sharing with other universities, and so be it. So I've not yet seen my P45 float pie, but you know, it's kind of just making sure that we do that and we do learn from each other. And it kind of works in the person. So if you want to join, give me an email. We'll welcome you with open arms.
And I think just to add to that, just before Jo, because I can see that there is a question, isn't there, in the chat box. I think when we created the PerCIE framework, that it's really important to remember that you don't have to change your curricula to implement social prescribing. You don't have to do that. And I think it's myth busting where HEIs sometimes think they have to go through major modifications with their curricula to implement something like this. It isn't. It's about passionate people who champion, who work with the programme leaders and module leaders and work with practice to actually make this happen, and changing the mindset of the students who sometimes have practice documents that are very focused on the skills that they don't think that they would be able to build in, for example, a social prescribing environment, when actually they can. So it's managing those student expectations as well. But I'll pass you over to Jo now.
Thank you. I want to come back on that thing about social prescribing skills as well in a minute. But first of all, we've got Candice in the chat who's giving some big love to folks for the presentations, and asks around her role as a district nurse and practice teacher, around how she can kind of help bringing student placements forward, even though she's not currently in a clinical role. And I know you've added your email around and the invite to the PerCIE group in the chat, Michelle. Is there anything else you wanted to say in terms of what Candice can do to help?
Yeah, I think there's some very practical things. So whilst we're developing third sector placements that will be fully assessed, so students go out there, for 6 to 8 weeks, they can also spoke. So they can also go out there from a district nursing service. If they've got somebody who they visit with the district nurse, and that individual's kind of socially isolated, you can see the kind of classic story, then there's no reason at all why that district nurse can't encourage the student to work with, getting that person out into a third sector organisation where they connect with other people. There's no reason at all why we shouldn't be sending our students out to find out more within their neighbourhoods. In fact, the PerCIE framework kind of recommends it for those students in year 1 that they do a neighbourhood study. They go out and find out what's out there, and they do like a bit of an asset map themselves and understand where the knit and natter groups and the walking groups are and what a link worker does, etc. So there are opportunities in which people can support students to go and learn and go and find out, even though they're in a kind of clinical placement. Has that answered the question? I don't know if I've got off piste with that one.
You're on mute, Jo.
I was doing so well.
Oh, we have to say it once, don't we, during a session?
Yeah, it's the oh god, not again klaxon, isn't it? I just wanted to come back to the point that we were saying a second ago about worries from students that they might not meet certain kind of requirements by doing a placement in a social prescribing kind of environment. So some of the things that we're doing at NHS England at the moment, working with partners across the social prescribing sector and in education with Michelle and others, is developing a workforce development framework for social prescribing link workers, and that includes a competency framework, and that's been published this week, which sets out the kind of knowledge, skills and behaviours that we expect and need link workers to be using and practicing and developing in their day-to-day work with clients or patients, depending on what language you prefer. So it'd be really interesting to think about how that might map across onto some of the kind of skills requirements that your students would have, so we can clearly demonstrate that, item 3.1 can be achieved by working in such and such a way, and that might reassure some folks from a certain perspective. The other thing I wanted to say was that part of the workforce development framework we're doing for link workers is working with NASP on creating a portfolio of evidence, a set of templates. So for link workers, this is to work with their supervisors and with their peers around things like reflective practice, around observing a link worker's practice, providing feedback against the competencies, and those kinds of things. So it's a kind of a culture that is developing within primary care and within wherever you find link workers around focusing on that side of link worker skill development. So there'll be, I think, a little bit more kind of familiar territory to folks who are coming in from a more academic kind of perspective. And part of that, oftentimes, I've seen like mutual observation working really well. So where a clinician can observe the link worker at work and then have that light bulb moment of, oh, okay, now I get it. That's why this is really important to complement my clinical skills or my others, the other skills, and vice versa. Obviously, link workers shadowing other professionals can really help them understand how they need to work with the wider team. So actually dropping students into that kind of environment, that kind of learning environment, I don't think it would be that unfamiliar to people, and hopefully really enriching for the link workers and other colleagues as well. That's just a little rant from me. I'll drop the link in the chat to the competency framework.
I'm just writing down, Jo, to email you next week, because that mapping of the competency framework against some of the learning outcomes for students, there's a lot of generic outcomes there that would work for both the link workers and the students, and I think it's worth a conversation, definitely.
Oh, can I just remind people to switch their microphones off if they're not speaking? Perfect. We have about 5 minutes remaining. I can't believe how fast this breakout session has gone, and I'm wondering whether I can't see any more hands and I can't see any more questions in the chat box. It might be useful. I just wonder if people in the chat box would just maybe use the chat box to say one take-home thing from today, one action that you might want to follow up as you leave today. It'd be really useful, because I think there's lots of ideas, I think there's lots of discussion, and I can see the networks that are already happening. There's there's exchanges of emails. I can see that, but if there is definitely a take-home message that you can share with either students or your organisation, just put it in the box, and then I'm going to leave Jo to actually navigate through, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I was thinking similarly, but I actually wanted to ask Wetlin and Samuel, as the future, if you have one thing that you'd love people to do or to take away, what would be your suggestions as a call for action? And that's putting you on the spot. What do you think?
Don't be too polite. One of you should go for it. Let's start with Wetlin and then Samuel. I think you're both being very polite.
Okay, thank you. I think mine would just be that there is a new sort of generation of doctors coming through as medical students who do know that health is not just treating disease, and the sort of themes that we've been talking about today, and how health starts in communities and can be built there. So just a recognition of that, and sort of for any BCSE organisations and also other professions, just sort of welcome students with open arms to have such opportunities. And my opportunities to sort of sit in with a link worker was really sort of fulfilling and enriching, and taught me a lot about social prescribing sort of on the ground. So welcoming students to more of those opportunities would be amazing, because we are here, we're ready to learn, and we're ready to sort of champion the same thing. Yeah, that would be mine.
Samuel, do you want to add?
Yeah, sure. So I think mine, I had to think for a second, would be not to be afraid to kind of challenge things, like challenging the status quo. Because I think what I took away from my immediate from when I first saw the social prescribing presentation at the RCAT conference, was a little bit of hesitancy from individuals who maybe had worked in the profession for a while, because they might have been doing stuff a certain way, or it might have been social prescribing, but also just not called that. So there was a little bit of a hesitancy. So I think it would be to not be afraid to challenge things and try and move things for the future, I guess.
Thank you. And you both did really well with me flinging that one at you. Actually, I was really struck by something you said earlier, Wetlin, about communications. And I think that a large part of what we're all doing here is telling a different story and using lots of different methods of doing that, whether it's just like when I used to work in the voluntary sector until very recently, I used to say that it was what we were persuading people one at a time. And I think that social media really gives us an opportunity to kind of expand that. But we've all got to do what Samuel says, which is not to be afraid to challenge, and actually having those stories and ideas and information that are familiar to us to say, actually, here's another way of doing it. Have you thought about this? Can we explore this here? It doesn't have to be a conflicting kind of confrontational type of challenge. It can be a constructive and can we think about this moving forward kind of challenge. A couple of points from the chat where people's takeaway actions were to link my support with local students from my university, being reminded about the importance of peer learning, and looking at shadowing much more, how to open up these discussions. Bogdan, you had your hand up for a second there. Do you want to add something whilst we wrap up?
Just five seconds just to say, Jo, you just reminded me, we launched a champions program with NHS England and Improvement and with the team there, with Julie Lowe and everybody else there, just to avoid the confusion of thinking that champion scheme is the student champion scheme. It's not. I've just posted the link in the chat. That is open to clinical and non-clinical colleagues across the whole of the NHS who are interested in championing social prescribing, and that's open for applications. And that's not a student scheme. That's just, I'll make the differentiation there because I recognize I put it in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I think we're probably just about time to wrap up, isn't it, Jackie? So probably time to say thank you to Bogdan and Michelle and Wetlin and Samuel, and also to Leanne, who's doing the driving the tech from behind. Thank you all so much for your time, and really look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.